Hello, and welcome to Butcherbird Presents. I'm your host, Stephen Calcote, and I am delighted to introduce one of my favorite people on the planet, and she's also an amazing director, Heather de Michele.
Yay. Hi.
Hi. Thanks for joining us, coming all the way across town. Yes, good. Thank you for your participation. Cheers. So, I wanted to invite you onto the show, first and foremost, because you taught me that there's a different way of directing. So Heather and I have been working together for almost 10 years now. Yeah. And the first time I went on one of your sets, it was for Real Girl's Guide to Everything Else, and we'll talk about that in a moment. And you were directing, keeping the crew up, and I think I heard a ding, and then you ran to the oven in our location because you were also simultaneously baking a snack for people?
This was happening at my house.
Okay, so you owned the location. Okay.
Yeah, this is low budget filmmaking at its finest, right?
Okay, that's
so
good.
like, we can do that in my kitchen. So
right.
if you're gonna have all these people over in your kitchen, you got to make some enchiladas or something, right? You got to bake for them. Yeah, that was funny. I do think that we bonded over that.
We did bond over that.
We bonded over the fact
Well, you showed me that you can be warm and businesslike. You can actually create a family environment, and you can get great things done at the same time.
Absolutely, yeah. For sure. I mean, everyone wants to enjoy their day, and you want to be part of that, and you want to help lead that and set a tone for that. But also, you know, there's a lot of work to be done as well. So I think if you just invite both of those in, you can make good stuff happen. Yeah. We're
going to go back in time a little bit.
Okay.
So I know that you do movies, web, television, like you're getting into the shadowing directors right now and moving that forward. I want to go back in time to where we first got together. And that was on the web series, Real Girl's Guide to Everything Else. So we'll jump around just a little bit here, but give me where you were at that point as a director.
Okay.
And I know that you'd come from New York. I know that there was some theater there, but give us a little context for where your skills had come from and what you were hoping to accomplish.
Yeah, so theater since I was a kid, performing and then teaching. Got myself through college teaching theater and then moved out to New York. And waited tables, but also did a lot of great and really, low budget, really edgy, fun theater projects, then landed a great job as an off-Broadway theater director and artistic director of a company, And and then that led to more curiosity about screen work. The very first thing I did was in New York, and it was maybe 10 years ago, like right before I moved to LA, Sandra Stingray Girl Gumshoe, which was my very first short 10-minute film noir piece. Lesbian,
have I never seen
funny.
this?
I have to show it to you. It's so great. And we were able to shut down streets in Greenwich Village and shoot, and I just felt like I'm living the dream. And it was a adaptation of a stage piece. And I had been doing all these cool shows called Lesbian Pulporama out there with a bunch of collaborators. So yes, moved out to LA, started to do more of the LA thing, which is, get on set. And so that was Real Girls. That was the first job out here.
Let me pull on the theater thread a little bit, because a number of us here at Butcherbird have a theater background. I started in theater, Louis Reyes started in theater. What did theater teach you for your work as a director, as a filmmaker? Because it's not the same thing. I want to know what you took from it.
I mean, theater is nothing if it's not collaborative, right? So if you can take that as your launching point, then I think that's what has helped me succeed in film. Because on Real Girls, I knew so little. I mean, I was really admittedly like, okay, talk to me about this camera and what you're going to make happen with it.
Well, that's the great Rob Webb teaching so many of us, right?
So I landed an incredible crew. I landed, the collaboration of people like you and a very talented writer, Carmen Elena Mitchell, who created this series, who was also a theater background. So we were able to sort of, be really open about the fact that we don't understand, someone teach us, and luckily there was someone to teach us. But I think the spirit of, again, collaboration from theater is just a direct translation, and working with actors. I feel comfortable working with actors. I feel like that's in my wheelhouse to help guide them toward their very best possible performance. And so I felt like that's what I brought to that web series.
Let me ask it in a different way. For those out there in webland right now, what would you say if there's a kid in Peoria or somebody who's an adult right now and is working in theater and they're thinking about getting into film, web, etc., what should they be mindful of taking as lessons or working on right now in theater? Even if they don't have a camera, what should they be thinking about?
That's such a good question. I mean, as a young director, I felt like my goal was to try and figure out how to not only be a good storyteller, but be a good leader, right? So leadership and how to help people feel good about their work and understand that their contribution is meaningful to the project. And I feel like that translates really beautifully.
That translates beautifully,
so
yeah.
I think if you can focus on that, I mean, I was really lucky to go almost directly into a web series, because a web series, it kind of feels like theater, right? Like you get this opportunity to really expand on these stories and live with these characters for a little while. And that's what theater lets you do. So we did a lot of fun rehearsals and stuff because, you know, as a theater person, I was like, yeah, we're gonna rehearse the heck out of the scene, we're gonna try things. And it was a bunch of theater people in the room, so everyone was open to playing goofy warm-up games and doing all that stuff that I felt would contribute nicely, and I think it did, to getting people loose and fun.
Well, it's great, and it's very legitimizing that you can take all that stuff from theater that worked well for you there and bring it right into the film process.
Sure. It's not as daunting as people think, especially if you feel like you can just ask questions. I mean,
Absolutely.
There's no other piece of advice that I would give to anyone wanting to move from one to the other. It's just like, yeah, find someone that you feel like you can ask questions and just pick the hell out of their brain, because that's it. It's all in there.
Absolutely. You know, it's clear to me I haven't been in the chair for at least a month because I forgot some things from the very top. I want to give a big shout out to the Wowza Clearcaster folks who make the live show possible. So thank you, Wowza. And if you're just joining us, definitely follow us on Facebook here. Like us so you'll get the alerts when we do more of these great live interviews. And, you know, check out our archives so you'll see other great directors and other great artists like Heather. So let's go into a little bit more context for Real Girl's Guide to Everything Else. I want to share the trailer and then jump off from there and talk a little bit about what is going on, because I think it's a little bit different than what most people get to see. So take it away, Adam.
Women of color unite and shop!
What? I went to Columbia. That's not happening.
Seriously? Check it out, ladies!
The next thing I know, you're gonna start making me date men.
Think of Afghanistan.
They look a little funny at first, but eventually you start to think they're cute. Like pugs.
Pugs are not cute. They drool. Yummy. I am getting married in 2 months to a woman.
Are those booty shorts?
I want you.
Excuse me?
Tell me what you want. It's yours. How badly do you want to go to Afghanistan?
Okay, look, nothing's gonna happen. I could tell him that it's a Lebanese cultural thing, that he has to court me for a year before he's allowed to touch me, or my brothers will cut off his hands.
I think you're taking this a little bit too far.
Look, someone has to tell these women stories.
Western women think they are so free, but we don't see it that way at all.
What did you do with my girlfriend? You are marrying her off to a man minutes before she's supposed to walk down the aisle with me?
I just got way more interviews than I thought would be possible.
Apparently she is the leader of some sort of underground movement of Afghan women.
To Afghanistan.
To Afghanistan.
To Afghanistan.
Yeah, that's great. It still feels just as fresh as the first day that I worked with you on it. I was a little blown away because I was coming out of a media environment where Sex and the City was very current, and it was considered groundbreaking to tell this story of 4 women in the city. And I came to you as an editor and saw a completely different story. And tell me what was going on there.
So this is all the brainchild of Carmen Elena Mitchell. She's the ponytail girl. She plays Angie. I hadn't met her before. In fact, a referral, sat down with 4 of the ladies in that were the producers. One of them was the writer. And I was just saying to you during the clip that I love that I've collaborated with all of them several times since, and it created such a great foundation for so many collaborations. But she just created this super smart, really unique perspective on, okay, what if we took 4 women that weren't, your typical, like a biracial lesbian. Let's just look at some different women. Maybe one of them's a nurse, maybe one of them's a hard-hitting journalist, and let's see what they talk about over brunch. And let's just take a whole different perspective on something like Sex and the City did. So it definitely turned that story on its head, and it was much edgier and much more gritty. And I think what people responded to was, yeah, I see myself in that.
It's interesting. Really when we were doing just warm up and rehearsal before we started recording, I said, it strikes me, Heather, that you specialize in telling stories with diverse voices. And you pushed back at me and you said, I don't specialize in that, Stephen. And I want to pull that thread because I think that's really important for today's conversations. So Unpack that for me. It's not a specialty, it's just
Well,
how you operate.
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough one, right? I see where you're coming from. I'm a woman, I'm queer. I'm gonna come to any conversation, any moment, any experience with who I am, right? So our point of view and our perspective just comes in the room with us. And that's why whenever you want to really innovate, research has proven that you get people with different perspectives in a room together and you talk about how can we crack this open. And that's why what's starting to happen, of course we have a long way to go, but what's starting to happen in Hollywood is there's a real recognition of the dearth of those voices and like what's missing from storytelling, what's missing from stories resonating with people on a deeper level. And I think again, we're starting to crack it open, at least by having these conversations. But this was very mind-blowing to me because it was 10 years ago, or 9 or 10 years ago, and it was Carmen saying, now's the time. And here we are 10 years later, and it's like, now's the time. I mean, where are we going?
Yeah, how many nows are we going to have to go through?
Yeah, how many nows? Time is seriously up.
But what's interesting, when it struck 10 years ago, and it kind of ignited people in PR interviews, press was everywhere, because remarkably, it took a web show.
Yeah.
Nobody had seen anything like this before.
Yeah.
And it was a web show that broke new ground.
Right.
And what's interesting to me is we're now a much more mature medium, and there are web shows that are doing better than broadcast shows, right? Tell me about the development process, because I think it's still a little bit of a mystery to people who have been doing the same thing the same way for decades.
Yeah.
How did this beautiful story with such diverse worldview develop? Yes, Carmen had the idea, but then you got into it and you created a story. Can you give us some guidelines? And forgive me if this sounds really reductive and dumb, because we talked as well about it's ridiculous that we're even having this discussion in some ways, but at the same time, I want to shine a light on what does it mean to have diverse viewpoints? How do you steer away from telling the same story?
Oh, it's an interesting question. I mean, I feel like what happened was the script was written, and then we brought the people in the room that matched the descriptions, right? So all of a sudden we brought those perspectives into the room. So when we sat down and talked about what we wanted to do with it, we had this incredible diversity in the room of POVs again. So there we were, all wanting to create something meaningful and something groundbreaking if we could, and all those perspectives were there to talk about it. So I just feel like we set ourselves up to succeed. Does that?
In some ways, it's just that simple.
In some ways, it is just that simple. Yeah, if they're at the table and the conversations are happening, you hope that something bigger is going to come from it, that it's going to elevate the experience, right?
I just had this conversation with one of my oldest friends in the world, another geek like me.
120 years old.
120 years old. It's amazing that he's still breathing. He and I were the geekiest and freakiest, and in 5th grade, we looked across the room, and there was our normal, right? And I said to Dawn, it's so interesting that I've finally realized that the people who have a perspective unlike everyone else are the ones that I'm most excited about talking with today.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't be rocket science.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be rocket science that we celebrate those who are different, not just because they have something to say that we haven't heard before, but because that's stimulating for crying out loud.
Yeah.
Because we're not hearing those stories all the time.
Sure.
What did Real Girls Guide to Everything Else teach you as a director that you then took forward to the next project?
Well, on a very fundamental level, it taught me that you can take a pretty small amount of money and make something happen and get it to a wide audience. I mean, that's sort of the beauty of a web series.
Absolutely.
Especially then. I mean, there's more opportunities now to get things live and out there, but at that time, putting it online and just saying, have at it, was so powerful. You're not waiting for a festival to accept you. You were just saying, I don't care if you accept me. Here it is, world. And people started sharing it, and people started talking about it, and bloggers and NPR and people started coming forward and saying, like, I want to talk about this. It's sort of, it was almost effortless in that way. Not that there wasn't a lot of effort, I don't want to undermine that, but it was just like, you just put it out there and see who responds and see what people do with that. So that was a big lesson of like, oh, you really can just make stuff happen.
It's funny that we're still needing to remind people about this today. And of course, what's changed is I have an iPhone in my pocket that for the last few projects I've done insert shots with and then colored them and put them in, and nobody knew the difference.
Amazing.
So the point being that what's really truly different from 10 years ago to now is most people have a phone that without apology, they could film something and put the web series up.
Yeah.
Which is
I'm sure it's
amazing
happening
and wonderful,
right
and
now
it is
while we
happening,
speak.
right? But like a truly narrative series
Sure,
or whatever.
sure.
And I guess maybe then to feed back
The
to you,
accessibility.
yeah, the big lesson is, as an independent filmmaker,
Yeah.
which you are through and through, you don't need permission.
Yeah, I think
You
that
don't
is
need
the
permission
lesson.
to tell your
Yeah.
story.
It made me want to just do it more, right? So I left that project inspired to just go, yeah, let's do this and let's do this, and I did. I jumped into a whole bunch of collaborations, and you didn't have to have a lot of money, didn't have to do serious, asking and campaigning and Kickstartering. Just had to sort of pull in some favors and some resources and just make it happen. And it's surprising how people are still daunted by that. I mean, of course, if you have a really ambitious project, it might take, or what is ambition? But if you have a really, if you're going to do it on Mars with 100 extras, it's a different.
How did you know about my next
Mars
project?
with 100
Yeah,
extras.
Mars.
Yes. You
Damn
can do
it, Heather.
I have $50.
I said that was a secret.
$50 to make it happen.
I want to say one other lesson, though, and I think that you said it during the playback. It's amazing that you're still working with every single one of
Yeah,
these creatives,
yeah.
including me, but all the actresses we saw,
Totally.
you're still working with, you're still
Yeah.
doing projects with. So what's the lesson there?
Oh gosh, just find your tribe, right? I guess that's the lesson. I got lucky. I found a tribe really quickly. This director of photography, Robert Webb, we met on this project. None of us knew each other. We met on this project, and we have done, I think, 9 or 10 collaborations since. I adore him. He's incredibly talented. I think he's limitless in his capabilities. Rena is a producer I've worked. She was an actor in that piece and a producer on Real Girls, and she's gone on to produce some work I've done, and just all sorts of great collaborations.
Kaja,
and I
you can
love all
see
these people
all over
deeply.
TV.
I directed a play that Anna Kaja wrote. She's one of my favorite actresses on the planet, and I'm thrilled to have opportunities to continue to work with her. So yeah, she's going to be in the web series that I'm doing next. We can talk about that when you want to, but the next project.
The big lesson that I think we've heard from probably half the people here is you're always auditioning for your next piece. Like everyone that you work with, you're in front of, and you are auditioning yourself as a talent and a resource.
Sure.
But just as importantly off of what you just said, you're auditioning to be in a tribe. And I marvel, and I'll just take a quick beat to introduce our tribe that's here today. We've got Jared directing, we've got Adam doing playback, we've got Griffin switching, and Lillian on downstream QA. And same thing, every single one of those folks, we've been down the road on a challenging project together.
Sure.
And every time you just say, wow, you were great to work with, I want to keep working with you.
Yeah.
And that never changes, that never stops.
I think when you're in the trenches with somebody and you're dealing with all sorts of obstacles, I mean, left and right, you got to get through one obstacle after another every 20 minutes, and you come out of it, richer, then oh, okay, those are people that are, that I don't want to stop working with ever.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So great feature film that I thought was wonderful.
Thank you.
As Good as You. No, that's the name of the title. I mean, yeah, just to be clear, that was the title, As Good as You. Let's go ahead and share the trailer so that people get some context, and then we'll come back and talk about it.
Cool.
So this is As Good as You. Take it away, Adam.
I want a baby.
Jamie's baby.
No, not technically
that's
my
not
baby.
exactly how we've been thinking.
It would be
about
more
it.
like totally her baby.
It's just, I'm sorry. Can we just start over here? You remember how Amanda and I always talked about wanting to have a baby? Well, Amanda suggested that we ask Jamie.
Jamie who?
Amanda's brother, Nimwit.
You did not just spend the last year and a half taking care of Amanda, only to turn around and create some other person who needs you to take care of her.
Oh my God, we are all just such children.
I don't know, it sounds lame ass and grandiose, but it's like we were gonna resurrect her.
What is so awful about wanting her back?
Good enough as goes.
What do I think I'm doing going through this all alone?
How long has this relationship been going on?
There is no relationship. How did you do this grieving thing? I mean, how did you do it right?
Who's to say I did it right?
You're doing hormone shots?
I'm 41 years old. I just want to get away.
Let's go inside.
If I could be as good enough as
Am I running away if I go away?
Where do you want to go?
Someplace where I can actually feel her.
Our time is up.
Jared, am I cheating too much to camera? Is that perfect?
I'm over here.
Okay.
I'm over here.
Sorry.
I'm over
sorry.
here. I know.
Sorry. We
You
got
fell
some notes
asleep.
during the break there.
Okay.
Annie
Take the note,
Potts.
take the note.
Holy shit.
I know. I was such a huge John Hughes fan as a kid or teenager. Pretty in Pink.
Thank you.
Watched it like.
Oh, you meant the film. Sorry.
Watched it like 400 times, and Annie Potts, she just is so amazing in that film. I loved her, so getting the opportunity to work with her was truly a dream. 3 days on set, and she was just such a joy and such a cool person.
Yeah. It's what a great lesson in how lifelong pros of the screen bring this electricity to a project.
Totally.
So, As Good as You,
Yeah.
another story that I hadn't seen before, and go where you want to with it. Give us some lessons there. How did you create it? How did you make a film as an independent filmmaker on a small budget? Just give us some nice things we can take.
Sure. Okay, so this started with an idea. Well, it's interesting that the whole film was done in honor of a dear friend that passed away. My friend Gretchen Michaelfeld, who's a very talented writer, wrote the screenplay, and she wrote it after her wife passed away. And it was one of those exercises in grief where you're trying to, find a way to get through it, and you're using art as a tool, right? And so, and this person was also a very dear friend of mine.
Wow,
and
that's,
so we were
that's a
talking.
hell of a thing to come into, by the way. That's a hell of a responsibility.
Absolutely, you're right.
So tell me before anything else,
Yeah.
how do you take a project, because there are equivalent projects with real life events.
Sure.
How do you handle that when it's so real and so personal? What was your guidance for yourself?
Oh, so real and so personal. Well, I mean, we were deliberate in making sure it felt other enough that it wasn't too navel-gazing, on our experience. So we had to be careful of taking sort of the spirit of what happens to someone when they lose the person they expected to spend the rest of their life with. Like, what happens to them as a person? How do they move forward? How do they get through that week, that month, that year?
So you made it more universal from the writer's personal experience, just to be able to deal with it.
Absolutely, yes. Even though the presence of that loss was on set with us every day, and a lot of the people, including Annie Potts, who were cast or in the crew involved, the musician Melanie Curdian, who we worked with several times over the years, did all the music for it. So, that spirit was there with us the whole time, and we were honoring the loss of someone we all deeply loved. And I think that gave the film a little more soul. It certainly
That's
did
the word
for
I was
me.
going to use, yeah.
It gave it some soul, and I felt it again every day. And I mean, back to sort of like the logistical thought of your question. So we started talking about, I'd love to make a feature, I'd love to direct a feature, I'd love to spend time with a story, I'd love to really explore grief in a story, and fertility was another theme that we wanted to spend time with, because Gretchen, the writer, and I had collaborated again for many, many years, and we had both gone through being gay women wanting to start families and what our own experience was, which is, so it was a big part of our dialogue.
And by the way, that's universal. It doesn't matter if you're straight or gay.
Sure,
like that.
sure,
So
yeah.
thinking universal, like there's a way, yes, you're coming from a perspective, but
Right.
there's a truth to all of this that everyone
Right.
can tap into.
Sure. So at the core of this story, Jo, she's 41, she loses her wife, she's grieving. She decides, fuck it, I'm going to have that baby that we had always talked about having. I'm going to figure out how to do it on my own. Of course, everyone around her thinks,
It's like,
yeah, terrible idea. You are in such a bad place. Why don't you take care of yourself? So, but she has this idea that she's going to ask the brother of the deceased spouse to be the sperm donor. So, what it explores there is what we're trying to hold on to when we lose something, where we're trying to hold on to it, and how that affects us in the long run. And so we got to dig into some really cool themes that I think were very meaningful to us. But we did the whole thing for $100,000, and I think that's noteworthy because that's not a lot of money, and it looks like $1 million. And I'm going to give that back to Robert Webb, incredible cinematographer who brought not only his skill set, but beautiful equipment and everything to the conversation and to the table, that we were able to really make sure that this looked like a really dynamite package, right?
Where can people see it?
So it's on iTunes. You can certainly rent it there.
And just look up As Good as You on iTunes.
Yeah,
Bang.
we got distribution with First Run Features, which is a really cool little indie distributor, and they do a lot of great documentaries and stuff. So you can find us on First Run Features. You can watch it directly there, or you can rent it or buy it from iTunes or buy a DVD.
Before I forget, because I probably will, if people want to follow more about Heather de Michele and your creative work, what's the best way for them? Is it through Tanky? Is it through a Twitter handle? Like, where should you send people?
Oh, that's such a great thought. Yeah, I mean, I guess following As Good As You, the film, on Facebook would be the best way.
Because you're still updating that with other things.
We're still updating that with updates, certainly with this and some things that come up for the creatives. The film got the distributor last year, and we did a limited release in Los Angeles in the Laemmle Theaters. So we kind of went through that, and now we're looking at how does the film live on once it's done festivals and once it's done its limited release. How do you get people to continue to engage and watch it? Hopefully it'll have a life.
What's the most gratifying or most interesting feedback you've gotten? Can you share with us a reaction that you didn't expect? Just give us little stories of filmmakers, somebody coming up to you, or it doesn't have to be a fan you never met. It could be somebody else, just somebody who shared an experience with you. What was an impact?
Oh gosh. Oh no.
Oh, speaking of impact, perfect.
Oh, when you want to avoid a question, you just throw your mic on the ground.
Can you still hear Heather okay now that she's destroyed the mic?
No, I'm not trying to avoid. You know what? That's a good one. Nothing's coming to mind, which sounds so terrible to say. I mean, there were several people throughout the process from day one related to certainly our lead character, but related to the themes that we were exploring, and that was always a really cool conversation to have. So I would say that I think this resonates with a lot of people.
I'm going to ask you something which we talked as well many times over our gatherings when we get together and we just share notes as directors and we want to keep improving. You know, I've become very, very concerned about examining my own assumptions because it's the time we live in, right? And it's a good thing. It's, you know, being a white dude in a time where we're questioning why are there so many white dudes here, and what are the white dudes like? Why are you so white, Stephen? I want to ask.
I'm aware of my whiteness.
I know. Well, yes, we all have something that we're privileged with. Let me. That came out wrong, but you know what I mean. Like we all have an advantage of some kind. Sure. We all have something that we bring to the table, and we all have something that we're not getting. But let me ask this question: did it matter this was a queer story?
Did it matter to me?
No, did it matter in terms of the story? What did it bring to the story?
No, not at all.
And isn't that interesting?
Absolutely. I mean, it just happened to be a queer protagonist. And I think that was exciting to me. I mean, this is part of why we need more voices in the directing sphere, right? Because we need people who aren't just telling that story of coming out or that story, you know, the stories we've already seen, which there's always going to be a time to reboot those stories because there's a new generation of people that needs it, right? But I think we want to expand on the kinds of stories we're telling. And we want to say, look, there is so much more to what this person has to offer to this storytelling field, and we're just not digging into that enough.
I don't mean to minimize it, by the way, and I'm heartened that you said it wasn't important to the story in terms of it being universal.
Yeah.
And in some ways, it's everything.
Sure.
Shining a light on a queer protagonist is still important today, especially because it feels like in today's political climate, we've taken a step back in many areas. But I think that's what I'm getting at. I see a future where diversity of story is just story. And diversity of inclusion.
Where we drop the word altogether.
Right, like it's you know, watching an average episode of BBC narrative television, and there are all these characters of different colors on the screen, and there's not a word about their race as part of the story.
Yeah,
you know?
They weren't trying to hit a percentage to make that piece work.
Right, it just happened to be this is how society looks, this is how our story looks. So I wanted to take just a moment to talk about that because it's both incredibly important and it's also ideally, it should be non-essential that the character is a different color, different background, et cetera.
Absolutely. I think normalized diversity is where we need to be getting faster.
I like that, normalized diversity.
Absolutely.
And I will share a couple of quick things. So you mentioned that in Real Girls, you brought a lot of those talents forward and kept working with them. So Rena, who was featured on Real Girls and was a producer,
she produced As Good As You.
She produced As Good As You, which is another great lesson.
She's dynamite. Hire her often.
And you know, Rena's been helping me, as I think she has with so many, where I recently reached out to Rena for some diverse casting. And I said, Rena, I want to cast diversely. I'm just so tired of all white people. And she's like, Stephen, good on you. Wow, bully on you for wanting to cast diversely. You got part of the way there, but no, just tell me who you're looking for.
Right. Because again, it's not about checking the boxes.
Yeah, and she knows that's not what I was trying to do. I was coming to it from a right place of let me do the right thing, but she's like, wait a second, Stephen. you still are coming from a place of starting with the characters and
Right.
everything else. Let's lead with that.
Right.
And you're going
Right.
to know that I'm going to have lots of diverse
Yeah.
options for you. So
Similarly, I've gotten called before where it's like, oh, I want to introduce you to someone who's really interested in working with a female director on this project. And you know, at first you're like, oh, great, you know, I want more jobs, so I'll, you know, let's
Wait,
have
I'm
this,
female,
let's have
great.
I ticked a box. But then at the same time, you just want it to be merit-based, right? You want it to be about what you're bringing to the table for other reasons. And that's, I think, what we're trying to get to. It's a nuance.
Before we leave this, let's just take one more moment on it because it's so very current.
Yeah.
And I have a number of friends who are shadowing with directors on TV, which, if you don't know, one of the ways you can get into television is you shadow a director and you basically go through their entire prep, shoot, post process, and you train up on the art of television. But this is very current right now because a number of women have come out recently and saying, dudes aren't in these diversity programs.
Yeah.
What, you're a white dude and you don't need a shadow program? Wait, what is going on here?
Interesting.
But at the same time, we want to bring a lot of people in very quickly and give them opportunities. Yeah. So I want to pull that thread a little bit more and ask for your off-the-cuff opinion. We want more diverse voices. We want to bring people in. And so they're interested in working with a female director, Heather. What's the right thing for them to have said here? Like, I don't know what the right answer is.
You know, I don't know that I do either. But I do feel like, you know, even just the approach of so-and-so saw your work and is really excited about what you bring
Let's
to the
start there.
table. Yeah. So it just becomes a little bit less about checking a box and more about you as an artist. But, you know, we're at this point where we'll take it, right? Like Ryan Murphy has started this HALF initiative where he has come forward and said, look, it is great. It's amazing. He said half of the women or half of the director jobs on my shows are going to be women going forward, period. Half, that's huge. We're going from 11% in the general population to half.
Stunning.
It's stunning. So just for him to come forward and say he wants to do that, great. And if I can be part of that movement, sign me up, right? So
maybe there's recognizing there's going to be some bullshit here in the interregnum. There's going to be a little bit of funky weirdness.
And I think the transparency is beautiful, right?
Yeah,
because
that's what I'm trying to do.
I think you do that well. And
but I mean, transparency and how ham-fisted I am trying to get my way through it and just saying, look, I'm going to mess this up a little bit, but please help me correct this.
Yeah. I want a diverse actor starring in, this is you, I want a diverse actor starring in my film because I think it's important that I tell a story about someone, and it's not about their race, it's just who they are. And I want to be that kind of storyteller. So I think that's the difference in terms of how you're coming at it.
Well, there's a beautiful mantra you started with in the first story with As Good as, yes, you did, with Real Girls, which is diverse stories are as easy as having just diverse people in the room to tell them.
Sure, yeah. Sometimes it is that much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the last note I'll make on this before we go into a project I'm really excited about that you're working with, they're working on, is, you know, at the end of the day, when we bring new people onto our teams, I think people out there should be aware, for especially the female colleagues in their lives, you're going to get this statement a lot from the women you work with. Especially if you're somebody who's already in the industry, and it doesn't really matter if you're a white dude or a well-established woman of color, you're probably hearing the same thing where you know a director who's in really good shape and you'd like to give her a chance. And what you'll often hear, this is still true today, I'm still working on it. I'm still building my skill set, so I need to do some more training and then I'll be ready to come to you, right? And I know folks out there are hearing this from their women colleagues, and I will say this to you from the heart, know that if you are saying that as a woman who has had the years of experience and you're saying, I need a little bit more training, there's a dude out there who is thinking
has already
this.
gotten the 4 jobs.
That it's not just that, it's they may be the same level of training, and what they're saying is, I'll learn whatever else I need on the job.
Right.
And I don't know if that's acculturation, if it's just bad habits that have come through, but if you're out there and you've put in the time and you've done the theater and you've built stories and everything else, learn it on the job too, because now the opportunity is there to get out. So that's what I'm trying to tell if I hear those phrases, well, I'm not quite ready yet, I really challenge that. Because you're probably as ready as the equivalent applicant who's just going in and messing up in real time. You know
Sure,
what I mean?
but this goes back to a long history of television specifically being directed by white men, right? So there is a young white man who gets out of college, film
and sees
school,
somebody like him.
and he goes, "Yeah, that's my next step." And there's an arrogance that's built in that person from day one of film school. Arrogance might not be the right word, but a confidence.
Assumption.
A confidence and an assumption, right?
Yeah.
And so that, this is part of what we have to do to help build women up, because we have torn them down so much that there's a long journey to be made. So that's why you take two people, you take a man and you take a woman, and they have the exact same credits, and this person has a confidence that's been told to them. A mirror's been put in front of them that said, you have this in your future. And a woman has been told, if you work really hard, you might have this in your future. And there's a huge difference in that narrative, right?
Yeah.
Huge difference.
Yeah.
So I applaud you for saying, I'm going to be the kind of guy that says, you know what, trust that you have the skill set. Don't say, I need some more time, I need that more. Good for you, because I think more people need to say, trust that you have it, instead of waiting for someone to tell you you have it.
And also given that once you get on a film set, there are 1,000 hours of expertise around you of people lifting you up anyway.
Sure.
Who are going to bring you on board.
That's the beauty about TV. Oh, sorry.
Especially, and film too. I was going to say thanks as well to you for having the patience as I kind of bumble my way through some of this stuff.
Please.
But that's
It's
growing together.
for all of us.
Let's get to our last piece.
Okay.
5 minutes. And
layman.
this is an example of activism, grassroots. It's what Obama said. It only ever matters what you do locally at the end of the day. And you did something. So 5 minutes with?
Yes, 5 minutes with.
Let's take a look at this and then we'll talk about it.
Why do you think people decide to discriminate towards groups that are ethnically different than them?
I've heard that Muslims hate America, so is that true?
Do you prefer the term black or African American or a different one?
When do you start accepting yourself as a transgender?
Let's say someone at school asks to touch your hair.
Of course I'll let you touch my hair. And then you better let me touch yours too.
Are you planning to get any surgeries or you had them?
I can't believe you asked me that question.
5 minutes with.
So it's a docuseries.
Docuseries.
Yeah, and this is a new collaboration, and this is just, you're seeing a very early start to what I hope will become a huge project nationwide. So I'm working with a collaborator named Shuli Cowan. She's a terrific producer. And what we did is we went to a local high school in Los Angeles.
So these are real people, real kids,
absolutely.
real everybody.
We brought in
non-scripted.
3 people we call experts in who they are. So we brought in an African American woman, we brought in a trans woman, and we brought in a Muslim man. And we said, hey, can we put you in a room with a bunch of kids and tell the kids they can ask you anything? Wow. And
it's a real life AMA.
Yeah,
real
exactly.
Life AMA,
But absolutely no. Let's forget being PC. Let's forget that they're grown up. What can I say? And let's just cut to it. So one girl says to this woman, I don't know if I'm supposed to refer to you as black or African American. And it was such a great, beautiful, honest question. I mean, how many times have we wondered that ourselves, right? So you're like, is one too casual? Is one too assuming? And a lot of the people said in the room, first of all, if you ever have a question, just ask. Say, hey, what do you prefer? Because anyone of any diverse background wants to be asked, hey, what's your preference? Because I want to be fair to you, because there's no one answer for everybody, right? So what we're hoping to get to here is if we could create a safe space where kids, teenagers, can ask anything. Maybe we can get them to sort of see the thread that ties all of us instead of the divide, right?
Awesome.
So, and some really cool breakthroughs happened in the room with all of them. It was really cool just seeing it live. So we spent an hour with each of these people, and there was just these great moments happening with the kids where they were hearing things they'd never heard before and understanding things in a way they'd never understood them.
And it takes something special to really move me online. And I'll tell you, as I said before we talked live, I teared up in 2 of the episodes just because it's so powerful to be that raw and honest.
Yeah,
and I highly recommend it to everyone out there in Webland. Check these out because they're so current and they're so universal.
Great.
Where can people see this?
So fmwseries.com, 5minuteswithseries.com is live. We've just got a few of our first initial episodes. You saw a little taste of those And we have plans to go outside of Los Angeles, which is interesting because this was such a smart, evolved, aware group of kids, which was cool because the questions they asked were that much more profound and thoughtful. But we would love to also go into a community where people don't have, maybe have never sat in a room with a transgender person and be able to say, what's this bathroom conversation? And have them explain, you know what, I'm glad you asked. Let's talk about this bathroom conversation.
Right, because the LA kids were very evolved.
Yes, surprisingly.
In how they asked.
Amazing.
But what does it look like when you go to Toledo?
Yeah, we want to know.
And because they may have never met a Muslim woman.
Yeah.
They may have never met a transgender, as you said. So, like, getting truly to the heart of Middle America and the conversation of people are just hearing this terrible chatter back and forth. We can't change anything unless we see people and talk to them. And here's the great thing I've learned. It's very rare, no matter what a person's background, that if you put them in the room with somebody, that they can remain completely closed-minded. You know what I mean? Like, once we put human to human.
There's our new tagline. Write it down. Write it down.
Bang. What did I just say? If only someone were recording this. So I'm so excited that you actually did something, as I began with, that you actually said, let me just change the conversation a little bit. And just like we archived this show, you want people to be able to tap into this. And gosh, what better way to get in than a kid asking a question? Because if a kid can ask this question, I sure as hell can listen, right?
Right.
What did you bring to this as a filmmaker that if you wouldn't have done 5 minutes with the same 10 years ago? Were you more confident? Did you have a toolkit that you used? As a director, how did you come into this?
Definitely more confident. I mean, just the conversation between Shuli and I of, could we just go in and just do a day of this? Totally. We knew exactly who to call and how to make it happen, and it just felt very easy. Just because we'd been talking about this idea, and it's like, let's just actually do it. Let's put these people in the room and let's see what happens. We had a feeling in our minds that it was going to succeed, and it did, and prove to us that we could keep doing this. But yeah, definitely a confidence on set and a confidence with the people in the room. I mean, that just comes from doing it. I mean, that's one thing you learn in theater, like just keep doing it. Just keep directing. If you want to be a director, just pick up those scripts, make it happen, do it in your bedroom, whatever, just do it. And
direct in your bedroom.
Direct
that's
in your
bedroom.
Advice
from
no
Heather
audience. Who needs an
de
audience
Michele.
for theater? Wait,
direct
that's not
in your
theater.
Bedroom.
But
that's a good point. It's the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours. You've got to put it in.
Yeah.
The question I want to ask you from just directing 101, you've got a person who's got a diverse opinion, they're different in some way, and you've got a room full of kids. How do you prep that? What do you do as a director to walk in and get it started? What did you say to them?
Well, we just had a very honest conversation about the fact that this was a safe space. And
so that's what you said before the camera started rolling. You said this is a safe space.
This is a safe space with the person in the room that was going to be questioned or asked questions of. And
so the kids are there and the person.
Yep.
Hey guys, listen up. Safe space.
I'm stepping back. I will chime in if I need to. A couple of times I asked them to sort of refocus a question or ask it again in a way that just felt a little bit more succinct. But other than that, I said, this is just, forget the cameras are here. This is a safe space to ask anything you want. There will absolutely be no stupid or silly or, misinformed or, offensive questions. That won't happen. And we will use what we all feel comfortable using at the end of the day. But for the next hour, I honestly just want you to talk, and no one is going to get in the way of an honest dialogue. So
it's really magical.
It was pretty simple after that.
Is you just sharing that, I kind of got into a little bit of the Heather de Michele directing style. But that is directing.
Yeah.
Setting the tone for the room, putting people at ease, etc. Sure. Directing forward. Let's close out with, what are you focused on for the future? It seems like you've got a couple of paths. You've got your web voice. You've done some TV shadowing recently. You've got a beautiful feature film. So looking into your crystal ball, what's next for Heather?
I'm hoping to get into more television. I loved it. I loved the experience of shadowing, and I'm actively pursuing some opportunities in that direction. I think there's something so cool about entering into someone else's vision. It's already created, it's already in motion, and this is something directors don't typically do.
Here's your sandbox.
Here's your sandbox. Everyone's an expert in it. Go figure out how to be a leader in it. It's this incredibly strange and terrifying an exciting challenge, right? Then to move that piece and that story forward, being the stranger and the leader, like when does that come together, right? So there's something really exciting to me about directing television, and I had the opportunity to shadow an amazing female director who, female director. She was also just amazing as a director.
And she was also just a director.
I didn't even notice
Weird.
if she was a woman or not. Who
I
noticed?
don't
I don't
notice
see
anymore.
sex.
What are you?
But I did learn a lot about how her name's Elodie Keene, particularly positioned herself with a male-dominated room, you know, and it was really eye-opening for me, and she's been doing it for 30 years.
One piece of advice from that. So if you're a woman walking into a male-dominated room, a little toolkit.
Just set yourself on an even playing field is ultimately the answer. Don't position yourself any other way.
Oh, I'm qualified. I'm here.
Yep.
Same level.
Yep.
We're in this at the same level.
Exactly.
And that's the assumption
You have a
going
job.
in.
I have a job. We are now coworkers.
I'm not asking for permission.
Right.
We are coworkers.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, great.
So it's just positioning, I think. It's
Awesome.
just how you walk into the room.
And you have a feature?
I say that like it's so easy. I have a feature. No, my next project that's actually in pre-production, shooting in April, is a really cool web series called Last Scene, written by a terrific screenwriter, Mariah Gretchen Robinson, who I'm excited to work with.
Mariah.
Yes, Mariah's dynamite. And it's a true crime web series about a podcaster who explores true crime and then sort of falls so engaged in one of her stories that she just has to investigate it herself, but she's not an investigator. So it's sort of this loose, unique way of exploring, unearthing something when that's not really in your wheelhouse. So it's
Great.
it's
Way
really
to go.
well done.
Now something else I have to watch because it's awesome.
It's awesome. It's going to be 6 episodes. We're going to shoot in April.
I mean, that is really exciting. Like everything you just said there, I'm like, okay, I haven't seen that. I want to know more.
Oh,
like take me on this journey.
Nice.
And so you start shooting in April?
We're going to shoot in April.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it is.
So maybe we'll have you back to talk about the show.
Oh, I'd love it.
That would be awesome.
I love it.
Thanks for sharing so much with us. Again, if you want to go to something current, look up As Good As You, and then you can go from there into all the worlds of Heather de Michele. And again, follow us. You're going to see lots of great artist interviews, storytellers of all stripes right here on Facebook. We also post the full quality version on YouTube, the full 1080p version. And Butcherbird Instagram and website, always doing something new. And we're passionate about working with a diversity of voices and storytellers for all the reasons we just talked about. Michelle, I love you. I'm sorry, I said Heather de Michele.
It happens.
Heather de Michele. Michelle, okay, here's something really funny.
This happens.
Something really funny. We added 4 L's to everything. So in the original lower thirds, we added 4 L's to everything
just to make sure
that all the bases were covered.
Yeah.
So Heather de Michele.
Yes, Stephen Calcote.
I love you.
I
Thank
love
you.
you.
And thanks for joining us once again.
Thanks, buddy.
And we'll see you soon.
Okay,
all right.
bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.